Hello and welcome to this Q&A from the Fertility Alliance. Today we're joined by Carolyn and Andrews from Verity PCOS Support Group, and we're here to discuss PCOS because it's PCOS Awareness Month. And I wondered, Caroline, if you could start by telling us a bit about what are the aims of the Awareness Month?
Well, firstly, thank you so much, Kate, for having us here at the Fertility Alliance Q&A. September being PCOS Awareness Month is really important to us. It's actually something that Verity, when we first established, we're actually the oldest patient support group in the world, PCOS. We established in 1997 and sort of picked the Australian group by a few months into being established. We used to have a PCOS, that was very much a very heavily concentrated week. But as the nature of PCOS awareness has evolved and globally and international links have evolved, other groups in sort of globally do a month. So we tended to move towards a month. And I think that's where there's an acknowledgement that this is very much a global issue and every country has slightly different issues. So for example, with us in the England and Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland, we've got the NHS issues, which people like in America, they've got the private healthcare system issues. So we all face different issues, regulation, medications, but there's a global push for awareness. It's something that we're actually quite conscious about, that this is a global issue. For example, you see that Verity as a charity, we were typically very much purple. The teal is eking in a little bit. Teal tends to be the colour of PCOS awareness globally in quite a lot of charities, organisations. Over in the UK, it's the colour of ovarian cancer. So we very much made a strategic decision not to have it the same colour because we don't want people to think PCOS means ovarian cancer. What we do want to do with the month is actually ensure that there is a real concentration effort between awareness and also action. It's really important that we do get to the stage of not just talking about PCOS, even though that does need to be happening, but also raising what steps can be taken. So, for example, one of the main aims that Verity has as a charity is the idea of information-based evidence, so that anyone learning about PCOS is not utilising things such as social media. Whilst it's an excellent tool, they're verifying the information against things such as the international guidelines of PCOS. Also looking at making sure that they're getting information from valid sources that aren't necessarily trying to sell them products, so that they can make a really informed decision about their treatment care and the management plan. We also have, as a team, this month, so different months across the years have been different things. A few years ago, we had very much an emphasis around empowering education and PCOS as an education tool. This year, we're very much looking at the idea of research, and we've got some fantastic things coming up this month. We've also doing a lot behind the scenes. Quite a lot of the work at Verity doesn't necessarily get seen. We're all volunteers as trustees, and we do a huge amount of work behind the scenes, and there's some fantastic, huge things going on at the moment, which some I can talk about, some I can't. But also as well, as a team, we've been doing lots of things such as webinars. One of the things that we find is really fantastic at the moment, how companies are actually looking at educating their staff, educating the management. So, for example, we've done some webinars with University of Manchester, we've done webinars with financial companies about how actually PCOS affects their employees, how PCOS can be seen in the workplace. So from simple things such as having different size sanitary protection in the toilets when they're offering free protection, understanding that actually PCOS can mean irregular periods, people being aware that this isn't just a single factor issue. It's not just menstrual health, it's long-term metabolic health. We've also got things such as the University of Pennsylvania are doing a significant research project into PCOS and cardiovascular disease. And we've got meetings on that this month as well. So there's a huge amount going on, and we're really, really pleased that actually a load of individuals are actually taking up the mantle and talking about PCOS, because it's such an important issue to talk about.
PCOS seems to affect different people differently, and I wonder, does that make it harder to get a diagnosis?
It does, and I think also as well, whilst there are many, many fantastic medical professionals out there, there is significant issues in women's health generally, not just with PCOS, but with women's health. There's funding issues, there's access issues, there's understanding about different ethnic variations. For example, in the UK, 1 in 8 women have PCOS. The variation in terms of ethnic minorities, it's actually, for example, with Southeast Asian, 1 in 2. There's been a fantastic journal out by Alid Rees at Cardiff University recently that actually looked at the increase of prevalence in PCOS in the country, and it has increased over the last decade. So there is a difficulty in getting diagnosed. And one thing that we say at Verity is we are patients, not medical professionals ourselves. Whilst our information is verified by medical professionals, we're expert patients. So we can explain about our journey. And I think I've got a fairly classic journey in the sense of I started my periods at the age of 11. I went to the GP at the age of 16, very irregular periods, not quite sure what was going on. It wasn't until I was actually 19 that I got diagnosed, and I was very fortunate that I got diagnosed as a result of a private referral because I was lucky enough to be in the position to do that. Some might say my diagnosis journey started at 16. I actually argue it started at 11 because I was having those irregular periods sort of from the very start. And there's a real issue in terms of diagnosis in adolescence as to is it just irregular periods? Is the acne just teenage acne, or is it actually linked with PCOS? There's also a real access in terms of access to treatments. Say, for example, with Southeast Asians, do they necessarily want to be sort of put with the idea that this is a condition which is a fertility condition? There's cultural associations around that. And we're really sort of keen to ensure that actually people are aware that this is a long-term health condition. It does have fertility issues, but there's many other issues with it as well. And in terms of getting diagnosis, at the moment, it's still the Rotterdam criteria, where you have to have 2 out of 3 of the oligoanovulation, the hyperandrogenism, and the polycystic ovaries. But we're also seeing a real movement to the slight change. So at the moment, the official diagnosis, you have the 5-count blood hormone test, and then you have the internal ultrasound scan. The international guidelines from Monash University, which is a fantastic resource, and the amount of work that went into it was huge. They're a living document, so they're actually sort of getting developed as we go along. And they've actually looked at potential whether we need to look at anti-Müllerian hormone as an indicator of PCOS. And should we actually be having a indication of PCOS in adolescence rather than having to go through the internal ultrasound scan? Is that the right thing for teenagers to be able to do? In addition, we're even looking at things, say, for example, with the current state of the NHS, the delays in diagnosis for getting a referral to an internal ultrasound scan. I know in some sort of different areas that there can be waits of nearly 18 months at the moment. So diagnosis is really difficult, in recognising the symptoms, joining the symptoms up, then having sometimes the courage to actually talk about it to your GP, because that's a real issue that a lot of women find that they have. And those with PCOS feel that they can't really raise these issues because it's seen as just a period issue. But actually then once that referral's happened, then the delays in the referral just makes diagnosis really difficult for everyone.
Do you find you get a lot of people contacting you who've been diagnosed and are then very worried about their future fertility?
I'd say probably it's one of the most pressing concerns. And again, about 10 years ago, I would probably say it was the main gateway into PCOS. Verity actually did what we call sort of a state of the nation survey last August in 2023, and 26.23% came into PCOS journey as a result of difficulty getting pregnant. So it's still a major factor that people are concerned about. I also don't think sort of social media particularly helps, because you look at PCOS on social media, it's infertility, infertility, infertility. At Verity, we'd like to refer to it as subfertility. Women with PCOS can get pregnant. Those with PCOS can ovulate. They may just have more difficulty. So the cysts on the ovary are actually eggs which haven't fully developed and released. So that's why people often have irregular periods. So by the very nature that if people are having irregular periods, then there is going to be a more difficulty getting pregnant. But there's so much that can be done about it. One of the first things that people often tend to do is cycle tracking, looking at their cycles, getting that informed information. So when they're having that conversation with the GP saying, I need to look at a referral on this, they've got the information themselves to be able to say, right, this is where I'm at the moment. One of the big things as well I have a real bugbear about is if you are struggling to get pregnant, because that's the journey that you want, and not everyone chooses that journey, but making sure that actually, say for example, if you're with a male partner, that the male partner get tested as well. Fertility is not just a female issue, it's a male issue as well. But with PCOS, there's lots of interventions. There's things such as Clomide. There's also things such as Letrozole. IVF. There's lots of different interventions that can work with PCOS. So yes, fertility is a major concern. And one of the things that I think generally, and I'm very much aware with sort of the state of the nation with IVF through different NHS postcodes is very difficult. And one of the things I would often say to people is fertility is an issue that you're concerned about. Try and look as early as possible. For example, you look at egg freezing on the internet. I'm 41. Loads of things are getting pushed out at the age of 35 to be egg freezing. Actually, egg freezing generally tends to need to be doing younger in terms of the egg quality. Um, Looking at people like yourselves at Fertility Alliance, getting the information, getting support, identifying what you potentially want out of your journey in life, to be able to look at these options and be able to make informed decisions. So fertility is a massive concern, but I'd also say because this focus and even the women's health focus, the women's health strategy in England focused on women of reproductive age, because there's such this push around fertility. People often don't realise that actually PCOS, there's massive issues in terms of type 2 diabetes, massive issues in terms of cardiovascular disease, endometrial cancer, fatty liver disease, sleep apnea. There's real long-term health adverse impacts that need to be taken on board as well as the fertility issue.
Could you tell us a bit about the kind of support that you offer people at Verity?
So at Verity, as I mentioned before, the trustees are all volunteers. Um, we do this because we're all patients ourselves and we don't necessarily want anyone else to go through journeys that we've had. Um, it's something that we're very, very passionate about. We all work full time as well, and it's a labour of love, quite frankly. But something that we've been doing as a charity over recent years, we very much started off back in 1997 as what I would call a on the ground grassroots support group. Coffee mornings, conferences, support groups, different areas have different things, linking up with local hospitals. We sort of moved and developed, and whilst we still do that, and we've got some fantastic local support groups. There's also obviously with the rise of social media, fantastic online support groups on Facebook, which are closed support groups. But we've also, as a charity, made a conscious decision to move towards more of what we would call a patient advocacy group. So we're a support and an advocacy group. And one of the reasons why that is we feel that a lot can be done. So, for example, we could have 10 people at a coffee morning and give them the great support for that coffee morning, information, looking at how management and things like that. Or we could talk to 10 endocrinologists, 10 GPs, and those 10 GPs can actually potentially impact a lot more. So one of the things that we've been doing as a patient advocacy group is actually moving more towards the policy, the strategy, the professional advocacy. So for example, earlier this year, we were kindly invited to the European Congress of Endocrinology. We spoke to hundreds of endocrinologists and dietitians and diabetes specialists and gynecologists and GPs across the spectrum. Huge amount from the UK. That was also linked with the Anginexus PCOS Society conference as well. Again, the young researchers going into PCOS at the moment are doing fantastic work. And the UK, it's fantastic to say, the UK really is taking a massive lead in patient participation. And it is brilliant to see. And people often say there's not a lot being done on PCOS research. There's huge amounts, and we're so blessed in this country to have some fantastic, not only professors who are really keen and engaged in PCOS as a condition, but the young researchers coming through on their PhD studies. We often, as a charity, help sort of do recruitment of participants, and that's a real big thing for us because actually PCOS needs research in it. We need to get the vocal voice out that PCOS needs to be investigated. For example, there's loads of National Institute of Health research grants going on at the moment into PCOS. We've been involved in a fair few of those, so we don't know what's going to get chosen yet. But the fact that actually NIHR are putting money behind looking into PCOS is absolutely brilliant. We also do things such as political discussions. For example, we were involved in feeding back on the Women's Health Strategy. We've also been involved with the Women's Health Coalition in Wales. And it's really important, actually, we recognise that England, Wales got slightly different systems. We're officially a charity in England, Wales, but we do have an outreach into Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. And again, there's some fantastic work going on in there. And we also have been doing things, so for example, with the international guidelines, we were part of the patient groups. There were 39 patient groups in there with the fantastic work that Monash University did with Helena Teed. We've been involved in helping to give patient feedback so that these are accessible to patients. So one of the biggest thing is if people needing to find information-based evidence, it needs to be accessible to them.
Finally, I just wanted to ask you, what would your kind of couple of top tips be to someone who's just been diagnosed with PCOS?
My sort of personal opinion is that firstly, don't panic. This is actually a very, very common condition. And I mean, when I got diagnosed, it was because my mum actually saw a magazine article saying, spotty, overweight, and miserable is this secret syndrome ruining your life. That's how sometimes people perceive PCOS. I mean, 50% of people with PCOS are lean. There's lots of different variations that we've talked about, but I think don't panic. The awareness compared to when I got diagnosed back in 2002 to now, it is fantastic the progress that's been made, and more progress will be made. So don't panic. One of our trustees, Alison, says, I have PCOS, PCOS doesn't have me. It's not your whole condition, although it can feel overwhelming. For example, if you get diagnosed with PCOS, it doesn't mean you might not have any other condition. It's a common condition. Other things like endometriosis is quite common as well. We tend to find people sort of get a diagnosis of PCOS and then they might not explore other issues. So I think stay aware of what's true to your body. Um, I think one of the things is actually knowing your body is really, really important. Knowing what's normal for you, because with PCOS there's a different sort of variation of normal. So knowing what's normal for you. I would also say potentially, without trying not to be overwhelmed, look at the stage in life you're at and maybe the next stage. So, for example, I got diagnosed at the age of 19. Um, I was at university and I had a sort of almost like a beard of acne, and I hated it. And that was the biggest thing for me at that time. Um, Couple of years later, it was the weight. Couple of years after that was fertility. So it's almost because PCOS is such a complex condition, it's looking at almost the symptoms at that stage. And because there is no cure to PCOS, there's management plans, there's sort of how to look after health. And it's this idea of actually good health is really important. For example, the international guidelines, they don't recommend just one specific diet or just one specific exercise. And again, there's a lot of fantastic research going into exercise. But I often see on social media things like, don't do HIIT workouts because it spikes your cortisol, which is bad for your PCOS. Actually, do you know what? Exercise is also good for your heart health and good for your overall health and your mental health as well. And again, it's shown in the guidelines that actually women with PCOS have issues in terms of anxiety and depression. So this idea of like the exclusivity, you shouldn't be doing one thing because it's bad for PCOS. Actually, there's often can be other sides to it. So it's looking at leading a good balance or overall good health life as well, which I think is really important. But the main thing I would say is check where you get your information from. Most people on social media are trying to sell your products. So utilising people like yourselves at Fertility Alliance, ourselves at Verity, British Fertility Society, sort of good institutions with medical evidence based information is really important. And at the end of the day, and I say this having been in various different situations in my life, don't let PCOS control your life. And I know a lot of people might be listening to this saying, oh, it's easy for you to say. I'm used to talking about PCOS. I do this as sort of a volunteer time for everything. Don't get me wrong, PCOS has been absolutely incredibly devastating for me on different occasions. Um, it really has. But at the end of the day, it's only part of who I am. And I say as well, and I always like to have a little bit of a positive spin, we have a tiny little bit of extra testosterone. And actually, do you know what? The idea of like we have male hormones, every man and female have male and female hormones. Those with PCOS have a tiny little bit of extra testosterone. I like to say that makes us a little bit competitive, a little bit of an edge, and use that drive, use that to do things that you want into the world. Use that sort of as a positive. Do you know what? I can achieve these things. So just I think if you get a diagnosis, it's probably been a long journey up to that point, but it's only just the start of another journey. And there's a fantastic support group out there in terms of the networks, such as yourselves, that I found through doing work with Verity, that actually the community with those with PCOS that actually want to try and help each other is fantastic.
Caroline, thank you so much. And thank you for ending on such a positive note. It was really lovely to talk to you today. And we'll put a link to Verity with this Q&A. Thank you for listening. And you can find all of our other Q&As on our YouTube channel.